Is the Sunday morning breakfast show with Sobia Iqbal on Teachers Talk Radio.
Good morning. You're listening to Sobia Stella Sunday. It's almost the summer holidays if you're not on holiday already. We have the best conversations coming your way. What's it like to be a teacher trainer? Thoughts on the ITT market review report, office politics, female rivalry, and help, my boss is a gaslighter. It's another thrilling morning. Prepare for takeoff.
Live from London, this is the Sunday morning breakfast show with Sobia Iqbal on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
My first guest today is Marwan Elfala. Marwan is a senior lecturer for teacher training at the University of East London, where he delivers and trains new entrants into the profession. We're going to come back to Marwan after this. Marwan, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, very well today. Are you excited to be on?
Yes, I am. A little bit nervous, but I'm all right.
You'll be fine. Marwan, for our listeners, can you just explain to everyone what is your role and what do you do?
Okay, so my role is I'm in charge of the PGC Computer Science group cohort. So that's about 27 trainees that I take through the year. I'm also a senior lecturer in initial teacher training, so there are other responsibilities as well. So there are times where I have to work with other colleagues in delivering lectures to the whole cohort. But so that's pretty much my role. I'm in charge of PGC secondary computer science.
Okay, and what is teacher training like in comparison to how it used to be from when you studied? Have there been any changes? Because both of us studied a very long time ago. So what's it like now?
It's actually quite interesting because when I look at because I was obviously I'm looking at it from two different perspectives. Then I was a trainee. Now now I'm looking at it from a lecturer point of view. Um, a lot of it is actually quite the same when you break it down. Because when I look at it, when I go back to my time, what did I do? I did 2 placements in 2 different schools. What else did I do? I did some academic work at the institute, and then had observations, was observed at various points, had a subject mentor, had a PCM. So a lot of it is actually quite the same. There are obviously differences now in what's going on. So, for example, when I was then, I was training to teach ICT. Now it's computer science. Now there is a greater focus on research. There's a greater focus on master's levels assignments throughout institutes. But when you look at the basics of what it was then and what it is now, interestingly, that sort of that bit there hasn't actually changed.
And so what kind of things are you teaching now?
Okay, so there's a lot that we teach. So there's a mixture of how we teach. So there's certain sessions that I deliver to my group, the computer science group. So that's more subject specific pedagogy. But then there are other sessions that we will deliver to the whole cohort. So these can be anything from inclusion to behaviour management to differentiation to assessment for learning. So the way that we sort of design the course is that you'll get a bit of both. You'll get a bit with your tutor themselves, and then also you'll get expertise from other colleagues. Also, the other part is all trainees are expected to do an active inquiry. So they're actually expected to go out and research within the school, and then come out with conclusions. And then also they have to do an assignment on subject specific pedagogy, um, on developing their own subject knowledge and pedagogy. Sorry, there. So it's quite a varied course. 120 days. The trainees are in school, and 60 days they're with us at the university, either online or on campus.
And so, what types of students are you selecting for your courses? Because, like you said, we started off with ICT PGCE. Has
Yeah.
anything changed with regards to that?
Yeah, there has been a big change. So also the government has made some changes. So for example, now you have subject knowledge enhancement courses. So you may actually select someone that might not necessarily be an expert in computer science, but you expect them to get there before they start the course. So what I'm looking for is, I'm not looking for the complete article. I'm not looking for someone to walk into the classroom straight away and be able to deliver excellent lessons or outstanding lessons. We're looking for someone that by the end of the journey, by the end of the teaching journey, has the right skills, has the resilience, has the passion and desire to actually go ahead and become an excellent teacher, and is in it for the right reasons. Um, we want people that will go into schools in London, ideally for us, and deliver an excellent curriculum, deliver some excellent teaching. That's our goal when we're looking at the interview. So it's really about, have they done their research on what teaching is about? Have they really thought of the pros and cons into entering the profession? Um, so we're looking, do they understand what teaching's about? So these are the sort of things we're looking for. We're not necessarily looking for someone to say, someone comes into me and their lesson plan that they're doing in the interview might be lacking a few things. That's okay, because that's not what we're not expecting them to be the perfect teacher at that point.
And so, if someone wanted to get onto a computer science PGC course, what advice would you give to people? And obviously, we know that we're talking about computer science because you are a computer science lecturer. However, just generally as well, what advice would you give to students who wanted to get onto any PGC course?
Um, right. The first question is, why do you want to teach? Um, so that's the first question: is what's their reason for wanting to teach? Um, then they've got to realise that there is a commitment to the course. It's 9, 10 months, and it's a commitment, and you can't. There's very little flexibility, so you're going to have to be aware that you're going to have to be committed at the school hours. You're going to have university assignments as well, so there is quite a lot of pressure in that 1 year, and you need to make sure that you're at the right point in your life and that you're ready for it. Um, I would, if I was them, I would speak to a group. I would speak to a variety of people that are already in the profession, people who have trained recently, people that have probably slightly more experienced. I would avoid just focusing on advice on one person. You might find that person that just says, "Oh, don't do it." You always have the one who always says, "Oh, teach, just don't do it, just don't do it, just don't do it." And they might be saying it as a joke, but sometimes that actually affects people and it sticks in their mind. Um, so that's one thing. Speak to a range of people. Then, when it comes to what do you want to teach, um, think about it. Do you want to teach primary? Do you want to teach secondary? Which subject do you want to teach? Um, that's something that needs to be thought of, because some people, if I'm totally honest with you, they will look at the list of bursaries that are available, and then it'll be like, okay, I can teach that. That's got a higher bursary than that. And I can't, to be honest, if I would put myself in that situation, where you've got expenses, you don't want to take on loans, as in it's understandable. But if you do make that decision that you want to teach one subject instead of another because of it's got a higher bursary, you need to be able to sort of say, yeah, I can teach that, but also I can teach it well, not just doing it for the sake of that.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because,
Yeah,
there are some people who don't think about this carefully and they come into the profession only for the money, because obviously the
yeah,
bursaries the government are providing are quite high. I'm not suggesting everybody does it, but some people
yeah, of
do.
course.
And obviously, one of the issues is that once they've had those bursaries, they do leave the profession, which is quite demoralizing. Is it not, for people like you?
Yeah, it is demoralizing. I'll be honest with you, we don't have many that actually do that. The majority that we do recruit, the overwhelming majority, do go into teaching in schools in London. Some of them then do go on to teach abroad, which that's fine. There's nothing wrong with gaining experience somewhere else or somewhere else in the UK, which get no issue with. So, but obviously, people have different intentions. Some people do come in for the bursary, or they do come in and then they think, oh, or they might not necessarily come in for the bursary. They come into it and then they think, well, this isn't actually for me. It does happen, not too much, but it does happen. Um, I would Other advice I would say is, and this one's a little bit difficult because of the COVID situation. Try and visit a school, try and gain experience inside the school. That's been extremely difficult for the past year and a half, as you're aware. We have had some trainees that some people in the interview interestingly sort of developed a sort of interest in teaching while sitting at home, listening to lessons that their children were getting, looking up the curriculum. So keep up to date with what's going on in education. If you are going to apply for a subject that's not where your degree is, you need to make sure that you are doing something to enhance your subject knowledge before you come to the interview. It's not a matter of coming to the interview and saying, you know what, I'll take let me in and let me have the subject knowledge enhancement course. I would want to know, what are you actually interested in this subject? What have you done so far that lets me know that you're interested in the subject? So that's a question that I would ask anybody that's coming in, because if they just come and say, oh, I want to teach computer science, I'm really passionate about it, I'll be like, okay, so what have you done regarding computing? What have you done? And then if they come back and say, oh, I've not done any study in it, I've not looked at it, but I just like it, that's not good enough. But say someone has said, oh, I actually enrolled into this program, I actually studied this, I actually did that. Totally different conversation that you can have.
And so obviously we want people who are committed coming into the profession. In terms of when students are on their school placements, what is the relationships like with school placements? I mean, firstly, between the university and the school, and then secondly, between the school and the students. What's that all like?
Um, so what we've got at our institute at the University of East London, and I'm sure others will as well. So we've got our core of partners, people that we work with and have been working with for years. So it's like every year we know we're going to send X amount of trainees to this particular school, and some of these partners are actually part of our steering group. They sit with us, they discuss with us what training provision that we're going to provide. Um, and they're really a vital part to the course that we deliver. Then we've got another group, which is where we're trying to get. So, say for example, I've got 27 trainees, okay, and we've already got maybe 20 schools that we're really close with, and then I've got another 7 trainees. So those 7 trainees, I'm going to have to venture out maybe to other schools out there and see if use our networks, use people we know, send invitations asking schools would they be able to take other trainees. So so we've got those that are very, very close to us, and those that give us feedback, and those that we sort of want to welcome in, and those that we might use occasionally, depending on the circumstances.
And so, in terms of the course that you deliver, And just generally, with regards to ITT, which is initial teacher training, for those of you who don't know, do you think we teach enough about behaviour management on courses? Because that's a hot topic.
I can't speak on behalf of all providers. Personally, I think we do teach where I am about behaviour management. There are core lectures on it. There's also for example, every subject leader will teach, will speak. We will have sessions on it. There could be role play. There's various ways of doing it. Um, Also, when they get into the school, they have to learn about the behaviour policy of the school. We have to prepare them for that. It's very difficult also with behaviour management because um, there are different ways of thinking about what's the best what's the best policy. You walk into one school, and they might have a very on its tools. It might be highly effective in what they do, and also it might be for a different situation, a different time, a different place. So I think it's an issue that obviously is important. Um, do we give enough time to it? I think that's a good question. So thing is, what you've got to remember is also there's a if you give enough time for behaviour management, you might be too much time on that. You might be taken away from something else. But I do think we do spend a lot of time on it, and rightly so. If the behaviour is not good enough, the behaviour for learning isn't good enough in the class, the students will not progress.
And so, in terms of the ITT provision, then, what do you think these provider training schools should be providing on the curriculum? I mean, we know that we need to be talking about behaviour management and pedagogy, but what else would be beneficial for entrants coming into the profession?
I think it's everything from inclusion, special needs, um, the subject specific pedagogy as well, as they need to know how to teach their particular subject. They need to know about the schools they're going into. They need to know about differences between school. They need to know about change. They need to be up to date with changes in education, changes with assessment. They need to know about how to use data effectively. There's a whole range of issues that they need to be prepared for. Um, 60 days, unfortunately, probably isn't enough to give them full justice. A lot of what they will learn will be in the actual schools that they're at because you learn through doing. You are there, you are seeing when the reports are written, you are seeing assessment in action. So there is a lot that we can do from the university side, but a lot of it is we do need our partners, we do need our mentors, we do need the schools to help out as well, in getting the trainees ready for entering into the teaching world.
And so, what are your thoughts on this idea of having teaching school hubs? Do you think they're effective and do you think it'll change teacher training?
It's a bit too early, in my opinion, to say. I believe that there's plans for like over 80 teaching hubs. So I'm a bit unsure what to say to it yet. Um, from my experience, um, there are some advantages of having some sort of localized body within certain areas. So, for example, when I did the NPQSL course, it wasn't necessarily teaching hub based, but there was clusters. So you're going into areas where you've got local experts that were teaching you, and there is a good aspect of networking there that does help. So I think we're too early to say really regarding teaching hubs. Um, so will they change teacher training? Possibly. I think you're going to be speaking about the market review a bit later on, and we're not really sure where we are heading when it comes to education with teacher training.
So, we can move on to the ITT market review report now. What were
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Um, it's just it came as a bit of a surprise. There's a lot of recommendations in there. Some of it, I would say, is idealistic. Is it realistic? And there's nothing wrong with being idealistic. As in, end of the day, if you want to improve, you're going to have you're going to need to be ambitious. So some of it is good. Like there are things. So for example, about developing the mentoring within the school, which I think we can all agree in. If I want to send, if I've got 27 trainees, or the university's got 200 or 300 trainees, you want them to go into somewhere where they're going to get excellent mentoring. You do not want them to go in there where the mentor's not really trained, the mentor isn't fully sure. So I can't complain about investment in mentoring. I can't complain about developing stronger mentoring. Some of the recommendations are quite sort of worrying. So, for example, there's a lot of things that the report is sort of I think it's pushing down the sort of one model fits all, which would be quite worrying. So it's given, for example, exact amount of times that need to be spent doing certain things, and I think a number of providers have actually said that doesn't necessarily suit them. We're at UAL, we've got quite a lot of things that we're worried about when it comes to this. So, for example, we're also worried about the timing when it came out. It's just come out right at the end when a lot of people in universities are actually on leave. So it's also, they want it put in by 2022. So we don't actually, when you think about it, we don't actually have a lot of time. So there's quite a lot in there, and we're a little bit worried, to be honest.
So for example, I'm just going to go through for our listeners what Dame Alison Peacock from the Chartered College of Teaching has said. And she said something very, very similar to what you've said, Marwan. She says that trainee teachers and mentors deserve the best possible support from the profession. Universities and schools work together in partnership to develop professional knowledge and understanding. And she says that pedagogy is an essential feature of our profession. But unfortunately, in the ITT market review, it's only mentioned once. She says that the market review hasn't got a well justification for the overall rationale. It's lacking. And there are some elements, like Marwan has just highlighted, that are welcomed. So, for example, the mentoring in schools is definitely a plus. And she agrees with the review about prioritization of the investment and expertise of teachers to make sure that we've got a quality batch of teachers coming into the profession. But she also says that part of the thing with education is the transformational impact, where teachers benefit from practical wisdom. And that's a collective endeavor between society, politicians, and higher education. So what she's saying there is that for the early career and core content frameworks, which have to be followed by those who are coming into the profession, it can only be brought to life by having those partnerships between students and universities. Otherwise, like Marwan says, that teachers are at risk of becoming de-skilled by over-relying on official prescription. And I really like this quote, actually. She says that teachers should be enabled to work towards a pedagogy of repertoire rather than recipe, and of principle rather than prescription, which she's quoted Alexander from 2008. So essentially, we already have school and uni partnerships, and they're already developing subject knowledge. They've already got curriculum design and assessment. And through this knowledge, experiences can be applied to the different contexts that they're working in. And that will give a wider understanding to the profession. And so that's really, really important for people to understand. And unfortunately, the market review calls for education to be evidence based. But what Dame Alison Peacock is saying is that there's no evidence that has there's no research that has taken place to suggest that these changes to the market reform should have taken place. And like Marwan said, there's a pandemic going on right now. Should we even be changing things? The timing has been unacceptable. The amount of time they have in which to give feedback has been unacceptable because it's happened during the summer holiday. We've got 30,000 teachers currently supported by universities. She does agree that applying for teacher training is complicated and restructuring might be needed. But she also says there's no evidence to suggest that significant financial economies of scale would be achieved by reducing the number of ITT providers. And she also says that there's an assumption that beginning teachers are being underprepared, which is not actually true. There are some elements of teaching and learning, maybe of pedagogy, that's not being done properly, or mentoring in schools, but it doesn't mean that the whole system is like that. What do you think about that, Marwan?
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with what she's saying. There's also this that all the providers need to apply for reaccreditation.
Yes.
Which to be honest, not necessarily a bad thing when you think about it, as in having to prove yourself that you're able to deliver an excellent course. But there's also got to be a realistic time frame behind this. Because if you're going to make changes, these changes need to be well thought through. And telling people just like in 1 year, right, you've got to reapply and you've got to apply for these changes to be able to adapt to this.
Yeah, and worrying. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that's worrying that instead of focusing on, you're now focusing on fitting into a new model that hasn't been well thought through. And the other point you made about the evidence, as in, why have they come up with all these recommendations? Like, some of have they carried out the research? Like, as I think we all agree, when it comes to mentoring, everyone wants better mentors, but I'm a little bit unsure.
And so one of the things that she also goes on to say, I mean, I agree with everything you've said there. She says that if all ITT providers have been rated by Ofsted as good or better, why does this reaccreditation need to take place? She thinks that there's been no consideration given to funding schools or children in the process, because obviously the upheaval is going to affect them. The report hasn't taken into consideration rural and coastal areas where it's difficult to get lead providers. And all this disruption could lead to teacher shortages. And some unis might decide against reaccreditation because there's no named body who's behind it that has been recognized. So she's saying that the rationale is a bit premature. She can see gaps. And like Marwan said, that there needs to be time for reflection.
Yeah. And I'm aware that, like, I have read that some of the other institutes, I think Oxford and I think it's Cambridge, have indicated that they're not sure whether they can deliver teacher training with the new format. And
yeah, that's correct. Oxford and Cambridge have both spoken
and they might not prioritise it.
Yeah. You cut out there, Marwan. That's why I took over. But yeah, Oxford and Cambridge have both spoken out and said that the proposed changes will make their courses unviable. And so this mass reaccreditation is obviously costly, and it could lose some high quality providers like Oxbridge. And she goes on to say that it's unwise and unhelpful because the system is already working successfully. There's just minor changes that need to be made.
Yeah, as in, it seems to be a revolution at a point when, do we really need a revolution? So it's interesting what the
I'm going to
Sorry,
give
am
you
I
the
cutting out?
opposite. No, you're cutting out slightly, but it's absolutely fine. I'm going to give you the opposite of somebody who thinks that it should go ahead. And this was by somebody called Stuart Locke, who's part of Research Ed. And it was an article in schoolsweek.co.uk. And he was arguing, saying that the quality of teacher training is too low for far too many teachers. And he was going on to say that mentoring is patchy, it's generic, and it's unsupported by high quality mentors, and there should be structured practice in place. And one of the things that I was slightly a bit wary about was that he was saying that there should be 4 weeks of intensive training in schools, which I'm not sure I'm convinced by that one.
Yeah, yeah, they've given like exact times, as in how much it should be exactly before you're there. So they sort of moved away from any sort of flexibility. So a lot of providers are going to have to be sort of forced into a way that they change, which isn't necessarily helpful. Because I think one of the things that is positive, one of the things about teacher training is we do have a number of different models that, and also there is some sort of obviously you do need some sort of guidance. You do need some sort of restrictions on what needs. You need the basics that everybody must adhere to. But it seems to me that they've chosen certain things that you must do this, you must do that, and why?
And so going on to another article, because obviously this has been a hot topic for listeners who don't understand how teacher training works. It is a big thing that's happening. Obviously, it's going to affect all the training of the new teachers that are coming into the profession. One article claims that it's going to be fundamental and irreparable damage to the supply of high quality teachers and it should be stopped. And there are 5 education unions, the ASCL, NAHT, NEU, NASWT, and Voice Community, and the Chartered College of Teaching all have written to Nick Gibbs saying that the government should be criticised for launching the review at the end of the summer term in a challenging year, and the deadline for responses falling during the summer holidays and finishing between results day on August the 22nd. And Professor Sam Twistleton raised concerns over the short timescales and says more time is needed for rationale and proposed solutions. So do you think it should be paused or stopped?
I think they've come up with some proposals. I think they should. I don't want to see it the way it is. There are some elements that I think we should discuss, but I think a definite pause, a definite let it go out there. Let's have a discussion. Let's use a range of experts because I believe that 4 people came up with this report, and I think those 4 people are all sort of coming from a same sort of similar background. So we need a range of experts to discuss this, not just a few a selected few. So let's get let's pause it. Let's have a discussion. There is no rush. If you want to do something, it needs to be done right. And then let's agree and take what's good in it and actually go ahead and implement it. Let's actually think properly. We want to invest in mentorship. We want to invest in training. We want to make sure that everything's high quality. Let's see, do we have the actual finances, or is it going to be one of these things where, yeah, every school needs to have like high quality mentoring. Every school needs to deliver this, but we're not going to give you the money for it. So I think we need to pause and think and see how it goes.
And that, yeah, you've made a very valid point. There are issues with, for example, funding and things like that haven't been taken into consideration. So maybe the pause is important. Work alongside teacher providers and make sure all reforms do provide the best possible way forward for our schools and our children, because essentially those are who we are. That's our community that we're serving. And it seems like this has been rushed through without any rigor and without any thought. So yeah, it does seem a bit strange that this has just come to light out of nowhere. So
Yeah.
Marwan, thank you for going through the ITT market report. Is there anything else you want to say on that?
No, it's just all I can say is that we're speaking to a lot of teachers there. Look at the recommendations and just have a think. What's your opinion on it? Because there's quite a lot in there. So it'd be good to see as many people's opinions on it as possible.
And so, in terms of things like this, as a teacher trainer, is it easy to keep up to date with pedagogy and curriculum changes and things like this that are happening in terms of policy?
If I'm totally honest, no, because things change so quickly. You're in one framework and then you're moving on to the next one. So you have to keep up to date, but things do change quite rapidly, quite quickly, which is good in one way, because I think if you stay the same all the time, you're not going to move forward. But are we going through change for change's sake? Are we changing things by just name, but not actually in practice?
I would agree with that. Sometimes we do change things for the sake of changing it and wrapping it up and labeling it as something else. But we really do need to think about the rationale behind this and the implications of making these changes. Marwan, just very quickly, you do research-based activities. You were saying that you do a lot of master's courses and things that are research-based. What kind of things are you covering on your course?
So, for example, all our trainees do what's called an active inquiry. So they split into a number of different themes. The themes are changing this year, but so for example, one could be last year's themes included like cross-curricular. Another theme was to do with like subject literacy. Another one was to do with educational theories. So what would happen is the trainees would choose one of these themes. We would prepare them for it on like how to write, how to carry out research, and then they would carry out a project within the school where they would see whether carrying out such a particular change in a way that they teach could actually benefit the students, and they would collect data on this. So they're researching, can they actually add value by carrying out some sort of change within the school, and the school needs to obviously agree this. It has to be right for the school, it has to be right for the students. It's not necessary. It's a short project, usually lasting about 5-6 weeks. So sometimes they just get a little taste of what research is like. There have been ones that have gone on and got their actual work published. Some of them do carry out things that then the school sort of says, "Oh, you know what, this is not a bad idea." So there's a whole variety of things from teaching things in a cross-curricular way. So, for example, I had one trainee a few years ago, and he was bringing the fashion industry into the computing classroom to try and engage more students. So he was talking about using technology on the catwalk and things like that, things that you wouldn't not necessarily bring. You wouldn't necessarily think computer science is necessarily related to. So that was one example. And we've got plenty of other examples where people might be working like on trying to have it with a greater focus on subject literacy, changing the way that people teach, improve their computing. So there's quite a lot of different research. I have got one trainee that came up with a new sort of method of teaching programming. So there's a method called Prim, and he changed it to Pridam, and he was like investigating would that actually increase the students' understandings. So as I said, we've got quite a variety in PE. We've had people try out new different ways of teaching, or maybe sort of changing the rules as to how to do something, or trying out new sports and seeing whether that would engage certain students, and sometimes looking at the disengaged students, what can actually be done to engage them.
And in terms of the students that you have, Obviously, I remember teacher training as well. How do you deal with students who have who have problems on their placements? What kind of problems do they encounter, and how do you normally solve the issues?
Um, Problems are expected. Um, I would like, it would be wonderful if we could say that we have absolutely no problems and all trainees and all mentors get along 100%. We're dealing with human beings. We're dealing with characters. We're dealing with sometimes trainees that are entering into a workplace that is alien to them. And we also have sometimes you might have a mentor that's might be new, there can be personality clashes, there could be ideological clashes as well. You might go into school that just isn't the way that you thought teaching should be. So the first thing is, we've got a set of expectations of the mentor, and we have a set of expectations of the trainee, and that's something that we will always expect both parties to adhere to. And if either party does not adhere to them, then we will need to discuss why they've not adhered to those expectations. If it's a problem that is too large and we cannot fix, then we would look to change. But that's not the first approach. Is, what are the expectations? Are the expectations being carried out by both sides? If not, what side what needs to be fixed, and we'll try it. We also use in school support as well. So each school has got a professional coordinating mentor. So someone usually within the senior leadership team, doesn't need to be senior leadership, but usually within the senior leadership team, that is in charge of all the trainees and in charge of all the mentors. Sometimes I find working with them is more effective because they know the members of staff. So, for example, I had an issue once with a trainee and a mentor, and it seemed, you just thought, oh, this trainee does not want to be in this, is not going to survive in this school. Quick phone call with the professional coordinator mentor, and within a day, everything was sorted out. And then at the end, the trainee actually wanted to stay at that school longer. At the end of the placement, it's like, oh, can I not just stay here? So sometimes that helps because you're using the person within the school who knows the people that they've been working with. They might have been working with them for 3-4 years and know how to speak to them in a better way than someone like myself. But we do our best to ensure that problems are kept to the minimum. But the expectations in both sides must be adhered to. That's the minimum that I would say.
And do you think many students drop out of their PGC courses? And if they do, what sort of reasons are generally given?
There will always be students that drop out. These reasons can be a variety. You will have those that have got personal reasons, family issues, commitment. They might have entered into something where they didn't necessarily know the time commitment. That can happen. We do try and help with well-being. We do try and provide support, but there is a commitment there that is expected. So you might find that. You do occasionally get the odd person that might end up getting a better offer somewhere else. They've gone into, last year, for example, with COVID, you had a lot of people applying into teacher training. So some of them might have just sort of, wait, I'll do this just in case something else doesn't come up. That can happen. We do have also cases where people have dropped out for personal reasons, have requested that they defer, and have come back and have completed the course very successfully and are actually doing really well in teaching. So sometimes it's just the actual timing for them. Something's going on in their life, and they have to pull out. So there's a variety of reasons. Thankfully, it's not the norm that people drop out, but I think it is expected. And then also we've got cases where sometimes the trainees, we've had to sadly sort of say to them, unfortunately, you cannot continue with the course, because they've not met the requirements of the course. It's not something that we obviously want, but it's something we do have requirements, we do have expectations, and if trainees are not meeting them, we are the gatekeepers to the profession. We cannot allow them to enter the profession if we're not confident they're going to be teaching well.
Yeah, I agree. If they're not able to do teacher training properly and show commitment and dedication, or even follow advice or feedback, then they're not the profession won't be suitable for them. Just to finish off, Marwan, then, the students who've come from other professions, so for example, they've done something else, like they've worked in industry before they've come into the profession, what are their thoughts on the education system? How do they find it from industry in education?
I think we've got a right mixture. um, so we do sometimes have people that sort of think, some are entering with false ideas. They're thinking they're entering, teaching's going to be it's going to be easier, an easy lifestyle, and so you have sometimes those that want to bring their sort of their ideas and their standards into education, which isn't necessarily good. You've got others that um, they use what their experience in industry to really sort of help the students and bring their expertise in there. And that's I welcome people from all industries, if they for coming into teaching. And I actually quite like the fact that, say, my group of 27 that I had this year, I've got people that have done various things in life and then come into teaching. And I've also got people who've just come out of university and gone straight into teaching. And I think everybody brings something special into the teaching world. Um, we don't just want one sort of kind of teacher in the classroom.
And just to finish off, what's next for you, Marwan?
Just now, I'm happy with teacher training. I think myself, I'm now in my third year working in teacher training. I think I need to, on a personal level, develop when it comes to research in academia. That's something that I've really got to get into. So I need to do more research. I need to develop areas of expertise. So that's for me just now. But I'm happy to continue with teacher training. But you can't stop learning, and that's what I think I need to work on.
Brilliant. Marwan, thank you so much. It's been great catching up today and hearing your thoughts on everything regarding teacher training, the ITT market review report, and everything else that you've brought with you today. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Sophie, for having me on.
Brilliant.
Right.
Right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Next up, help. My boss is gaslighting me. We're going to be talking office politics.
Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts, or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsia puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. free. Just visit our website www.CRE8TIVEresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TTRadio. Creative resources made for teachers by teachers. Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Tom Hopkins-Burke.
This is your weekend Teachers Talk Radio News with Tom Hopkins-Burke. The leader of the Association of School and College Leaders has warned that children will be kept off school in the final days of term to avoid having to self-isolate during the summer holidays. Jeff Barton said that parents should send their children to school in the last days of the summer term, despite the potential for self-isolation to interfere with family holidays. More than 830,000 children were out of school last week for COVID-related reasons, the highest figure since schools returned to face-to-face learning on the 8th of March. The retailer School Uniform Direct has told customers to order soon because of COVID-related production and transport delays. Disruption in overseas factories, a shortage of shipping containers, and the impact of Brexit has led the clothing firm to experience major production interruptions. While School Uniform Direct placed orders for this year's back-to-school season as far back as last autumn, 30% of deliveries are yet to arrive on time. Matthew Easter, co-chair of the Schoolwear Association, said that the industry should be able to clothe children as normal in time for the new school year. A Conservative MP was reportedly asked to leave a secondary school question and answer session after claiming that the Black Lives Matter movement was a Marxist idea. Jackie Doyle-Price, MP for Thurrock, was said to have caused an uproar when she refused to support Black Lives Matter. The incident, which according to a parent took place during a school assembly, led to the students being sent back to their room. Around half of the children at the school are believed to be from a black background. That was your weekend Teachers Talk Radio News with Tom Hopkins-Burke.
Thanks for that, Tom. Right, I'm expecting a guest who hasn't entered the studio yet. It's Liam Davis, his head of year and a radio presenter for Shoreditch radio station. We're going to be discussing a wide range of office politics today. I'm just going to check if this is Liam. Hi, Liam. Whilst he's getting himself sorted out, as I was saying, we're going to discuss office politics. I asked a question on social media a while ago. And the question that I asked was, has your career been affected by office politics? Have you had to step down, take a sideways move, or leave the profession? People messaged saying that they left the profession altogether due to workplace abuse from their management. Hi, Liam, is that you?
Hi, Sobia, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very, very well.
Are you ready for a... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, it's nice to be with you this morning.
Brilliant. I've actually spoken to Liam quite a few times. I went on to Liam's show a while ago as well, so it's really good to have you here, Liam. We're discussing office politics today, and I'm so glad that you've come in. As I was saying, some people's careers have been affected by office politics, and they've either taken a step down or moved sideways or left the profession. And I'm just going to quickly go through some scenarios, Liam. So some people message saying that they left the profession altogether due to workplace abuse from their management. Another took a step down to escape her school. And one person messaged in saying that queen bees have been problematic on occasion, leaders with egos who tried to sabotage her. There was lots of power play and it was really hard to navigate. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, again, like with everything, I think a lot of this boils down to the culture of the school. I think if a school has got a good culture, then I think these things don't really happen. And I mean, listen, that's not to say in schools that have good cultures there isn't examples of this, because there probably is. But I do genuinely think that a lot of this boils down to what the culture of the school is like. I think in schools where the culture is very toxic, and it can be, and sometimes it's not obvious, but in schools where the culture is toxic, this sort of thing happens very, very regularly. Workloads can become an issue. I think there are all sorts of different factors that you can take into account.
I'm going to go through a few stories, Liam, and I agree with you. It does depend on the culture of the school. And unfortunately, just like any other profession, there are some environments which are really, really toxic. So I'm just going to go through a story at a time just to tell you the extent of which office politics is disrupting people's careers. So one person messaged in saying that they weren't good at politics and they just wanted to work and teach, but they had to retire in 2016 due to toxic leadership who not only condoned bullying, but they actively promoted it. And because it was a negative environment, they left and then they returned on supply and accepted a permanent post. Suddenly, things went wrong. The leaders in the profession made up lies and threatened with formal proceedings for whatever the issues were. And in 1 week, she had three 1-hour observations because she challenged the head teacher, and then she faced more problems at work. And she wasn't able to pursue anything because she needed a reference.
I mean, again, that again doesn't surprise me massively. Again, I probably sound a bit like a broken record, but I do think if you're in a school where that is the established culture, then what you've just described there is very, very inevitable. Because, listen, no one's saying that you go out of your way to challenge the head on any matter, to be honest. If the head is good, then there isn't generally any need. But there does need to be some form of accountability, as there does for everybody in the profession. And that's in any profession, not just in teaching. That's in every industry that exists. Now, if you establish a culture where you are beyond challenge, and I've seen it personally, then those scenarios that you just talked about are absolutely inevitable. And that sounds like a very sad case indeed that you've just spoken about.
And I'm going to go through another one, because I'm going to lead up, because there's one shocking story, then another one, and then another one. I was quite blown away, Liam, about how many people messaged me and gave me their stories. Another story was another person said that she had lies on her references, and also behind the reference, the head teacher or whoever it was in charge of her manager, slandered her on the phone and ruined her professional reputation with some of the schools that she was applying to. So she was unable to get a job for a year. She almost had a nervous breakdown. She ended up doing supply teaching. The bully, who was the head teacher, was an undercover covert bully. And in her reference, it was written that she was unreliable and she they would never hire her again if she ever applied again. And her references were checked out. And she also realized that the supply agency had also altered her reference. She developed post-traumatic stress disorder. She lost trust of colleagues and eventually left the career due to abuse and toxic environment.
Well, again, I mean, it's another very sad example there. I mean, what I would always say to people if I was giving out some advice around this is, always engage your professional body. Whether you're in the NEU or whether you're in the NASUWT or one of the other unions, you should obviously establish those cultures within being involved with your professional body. I mean, it isn't always easy, particularly if you've left the school, but you obviously pay that membership fee each month. And it's funny you mentioned that story, because I did see a story on the tests this morning. It was very similar to the scenario that you just read, actually, whereby there was a teacher who'd said that they'd gone for another job and the interview seemed to go amazingly well. They were offered the job, and then I think the job was rescinded and they couldn't work out for the reasons why. And then they asked to see the reference that had been written by the head teacher, and the reference was really poor. And this teacher had a very good record in the school that they were leaving. So that story that you just read out is seemingly quite common.
Yeah, and it's quite common. And not only that, I'm a bit shocked, because as far as I was aware, when you're coming to writing references, I thought that you weren't allowed to write anything negative. I understand that people can say things, off the record, i.e. they shouldn't be, but some people do go and talk about other people outside of that professional capacity. But to actually write something negative in a reference, I was quite shocked about that.
Well, I think, again, it's one of them, isn't it, where references can be quite ambiguous, in the sense that I don't think anybody's really quite sure. I mean, someone listening might well be able to correct us all and say, well, actually, there's a defined criteria for references. But, I've heard of stories where, people have gone for jobs and been given a blank reference. And when it's been
what's
queried,
the blank reference, Liam?
Well, like a blank reference, basically a blank reference is where you leave the page completely blank. The school where you're going to have requested a reference, and actually the head of that school has said, well, I can't write anything bad, so I won't write anything at all. Okay. And have said blank reference. And I know someone who was the victim of that about 4 or 5 years ago. Luckily, the school that she went to still gave her the job, because the other reference she got was an excellent one, and her record spoke for herself. But again, some schools, some heads can be quite petty. It's I guess the way some people are. It's not right. We all know it's not right, but sadly, it still goes on.
But this is what makes me laugh, because we're obviously an ethical profession, and to have people do this, to go through and condone this behavior and have this happening in our profession, to me, it seems just ridiculous. I mean, I think that if I worked with someone who I disliked, or I didn't get along with, or I wasn't happy with their work or productivity, I would never write anything negative, because I would be affecting their life chances and essentially their careers. You're talking about people's families and livelihoods here.
No, you are. You're absolutely right. I mean, I always like to use the sort of references that we do for students. I mean, when I think about when students are leaving school at either at year 13 or at year 11, we obviously have to write references for them. And particularly in year 11, I mean, there'll be a lot of students that you'll write references for who, over the course of those 5 years, some will have not been that well behaved and not been brilliant, And I know people say, well, they're teenagers, we're talking about adults. But, when we generally write those references at the end of year 11, unless it's a very severe case, generally, we will always attenuate the positive with those references. Now, my view is if a teacher, unless a teacher has been, very poor in their performance in a school, then I think you have to be, you have to be fair. And as you quite rightly just said there, you have to respect that, these are people's families, it's their livelihoods, it's their mortgages, it's their life. And, my view is unless somebody has massively messed up, then I think you have to be fair. And examples of, blank references and, exceptionally poor references. I mean, unless I think there is absolute justification for that, I mean, it's very, very petty. But as some of what you just read out, obviously it does still go on.
Yeah, and I think it does come back down to the individual. And like you said, it is petty. So I would be concerned, for example, if I was in a leadership position and somebody sent me a reference like that, or they phoned me up, I would say that was really unprofessional. And it would make me look at that person negatively rather than the person whose reference it is.
Well, I think as you define this conversation at the very beginning, you mentioned politics. Well, generally, that's what this is. It's petty politics. That's that's a really good description for it. It's people like to play politics. I'm sure we've all worked with people. I know I have. I'm sure you have. I'm sure some of the listeners have worked with people that like to play politics, where ego and things like that are far more important than actually the core business of the day. So again, I mean, I think solutions to this are far harder than knowing the problems. I mean, I think you could probably read out some more examples. I think we all know what the problems are. I think the solutions to it are far harder because, obviously, particularly as well these days with academies and academization and all of that sort of thing, and accountability now in those sort of environments in maths particularly is a very cutthroat, environment. It's almost become like the business sector, you're in the city of London. So
and I'm going to come on to that. I'm going to come on to that, Liam.
Yeah, go on, go for it.
So before we come on to that, I was just going to say that I've had a few comments coming in because obviously this is a hot topic. I've had one listener say, I don't work in schools, but I've been a contractor in many different places due to office politics. And I always found that the toxic culture stemmed from incompetent management who had insecurities. Competent managers get the best outcomes from their teams, which is a good point. And I have another listener, Sabah, hello. She says that the concept of the blank or minimal reference is standard practice in many of the corporate workplaces. They have a very strict policy of not providing anything more than the employee's name, dates during which they work there, title or role, and that's about it. The aim is to avoid controversy. And then we've got Freya who's messaged in saying that she agrees that a lot of the toxicity comes from insecurity.
Well, I think it does. I mean, I've been lucky enough to work for some really great heads, and I'm sure some of the listeners and yourself have worked for some really, really good heads. A lot of this is to do with ego. I worked for, you mentioned earlier about, I think, when we were talking off air about examples of where maybe you've had to sort of step into lesser positions in some respects. And, I've done that in my career, because, I worked for one head in particular, who I did believe actually at one stage thought they were God. They had their ego was that big. No, honestly, I speak honestly. I think this particular head, she did actually think she was God. And I think when you start to believe that, and now I reflect back on it, and as I say, I've worked with some really great head teachers like, Dame Joan McVitie, for example, who was, the first head I ever worked for. She was, someone who I respect hugely, and I didn't always agree with her. You don't always agree with every head that you work for, but she was a strong leader and she truly believed in what she was doing. And, and I think when ego starts to creep in, and as I mentioned just a minute ago with this particular head that I worked for, I think that's when it becomes a problem. And I'm sure there's probably lots of examples of that out there.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what you were saying, that if a head teacher has an ego problem, which is narcissism, which we'll come on to in a bit later on, because we're going to talk about gaslighting bosses afterwards, it does make it difficult, because essentially one of the problems we do have in the profession is that you've only got one person essentially looking out for you, your line manager and the head teacher, and it becomes difficult because the profession is so small, and so people are very good at masking who they are, and as people assume that just because you've got a title that you must be correct and you must be in the right, which is completely wrong.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a fine line here with this. I mean, like I said, there'll be nobody out there who says they absolutely agree 100% with every decision that the head teacher makes. And I would love to meet someone who says, I agreed with that head 100% all of the time, because I don't think that would be the case. I do think you have to respect the office that the person holds. Of course, they're the boss. But if there's a culture established whereby you can't, speak to that person or hold them accountable, then I think then you've got a very big problem on your hands. If the dialogue has been cut off and the opportunity to raise a point has been cut off, then you have a big problem on your hands. And I think, that's sounding like, from some of the examples that you've received on the comments, that it is quite common, maybe more common than we think.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is that you've mentioned constructive dissent in organizations is the path to innovation. So I never understand those people in leadership positions who want yes men around them, because that's not how an organization moves forward. I've had another comment come in saying that it's from Navida, saying that someone was given a glowing reference because their manager wanted to get rid of them, and if they gave a bad reference, that person would never have left their team. So that happens as well when you're giving a glowing reference to get rid of someone.
I mean, that is an absolutely true point. And listen, I'm sure, and again, that's in every industry. That's not just something that's in education. That's in every industry under the sun. There will be references that are written that are absolutely not true, but they are glowing just because that head or that manager wants to get rid of them. And that, I'm sure, happens a lot also. But then that's not fair on those people who do work hard and perhaps have had disagreements with the head, but actually have got a strong record as a teacher, but yet they're given a bad reference because they challenged maybe the management or the head. So it's ethically wrong. But as the commenter just said, it does happen. Sadly, it does, and it's not fair on those who are a victim of getting a bad reference because they challenged the head out on certain instances.
Right, I'm going to go through one last story, which is a brilliant one, which isn't actually brilliant in terms of what happened, but it is a brilliant example of what's happening in our profession. So this was a multi-academy trust. The head of department was managing out a member of staff, and what she was doing was messaging people on WhatsApp. She was swearing about the colleague, and she was making it a campaign to get rid of the person. And when it was highlighted to her that you can't get rid of that teacher, her response was no, but there are ways. She then reverted to putting him under a lot of scrutiny and a support plan, so he had no choice but to leave. She brought in new subject leads to sort out the department and made sure that that person was bullied, was intimidated, unprofessional language was used towards them. One other member, his dad had cancer, and he was also being harassed. So he couldn't tolerate it. He sent out WhatsApp messages to NEU, who then escalated the situation. And then the head of HR tried to negotiate an exit plan for this person and another subject lead and asked them to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And he didn't want to leave, but they actively tried to manage him out, and he eventually resigned. One member of staff was paid off. Other members of the department resigned. A non-disclosure agreement was not signed by this member of staff who sent me the story, but he was offered payments from 3,000, which went up to 8,000, which went up to 14,000, because MAT takeovers are hostile. And that was quite shocking.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's shocking, but actually in today's world, it probably isn't, because again, I think as you mentioned earlier, that's come from the business world where that is common. Payoffs, you know, bullying, workplace bullying, that cutthroat culture has come from big business. And obviously, you know, the advent of multi-academy trusts and obviously these are run by business people rather than in some cases education people. It's a cutthroat business, and
It's
sadly,
quite-
as I said, I mean, sadly, it's because you know, we're in a business world now. I don't see that reversing anytime soon.
It is sad, and the reason why it's shocking for me is because obviously I started a very long time ago, and I've not worked for a multi-academy trust. And for me, it's shocking because I'm thinking we're in an ethical profession, and this should not be happening at all. So when it comes to MAT takeovers, staff are usually issued an ultimatum to resign or reapply for jobs. Usually, mass resignation takes place. I mean, why is this happening in a profession which is supposed to be ethical?
Well, I think, again, as I was saying, I think a lot of this is because these organisations are not run by education people. They're run by people, in some cases, who've worked in business. And, you know, this is a common practice in business whereby, you know, you get rid of people. It's a cutthroat business. And I'm afraid to say that sort of business practice has come into education in the last 10 years because of, as we know, the removal, obviously, of local authorities being the dominant, you know, provider of education. It's now the dominant provider are multi-academy trusts, and there are many, many of them now. There's not just, you know, a few years ago, people had only probably really heard of Harris and ARC, but now there are, I wouldn't even want to put an estimate on it, but I can imagine there must be about 40, probably 50 multi-academy trusts in the UK, I would think, across primary and secondary. So, you know, I just don't think it's going to reverse anytime soon.
No, I don't think it is either. And when we're looking at office politics, I mean, negative office politics is when an organization can't function. So when we're talking about this, it used to be things like, and it still is, stealing credit for other people's work, undermining people, withholding information, sabotage, rumor, gossips, backstabbing. All of those are typical office politics. But it seems that there are some organizations that are going beyond that, which is quite worrying.
Yeah, I mean, it is very worrying. But listen, let's not be under any illusion. Some of those things have been going on for many, many years in teaching, but not just in teaching, in any profession. You know, I used to work in Marks and Spencer's many years ago when I was studying, and, you know, the politics used to go on there between management and the staff, if you like. So it isn't something that's just confined to teaching. So I think we should probably put that on record. But I do think in teaching, like I said, because of the competitive nature of the way it's become in the last maybe 8 to 10 years, has become more apparent and more visible. And you mentioned earlier when you was talking about the previous commenter's story, you know, the advent of things like WhatsApp groups and social media and all this thing. You know, I'd be honest, I'm a bit old-fashioned. I don't really agree with sort of departmental WhatsApp groups as such. You know, I know it does go on and it does exist. You know, I know it does. But actually, I don't think those things are particularly healthy. I get why they happen because it keeps people in touch. You could talk about departmental matters and things like that. But to be honest, actually, when you walk out that door at whatever time you walk out, 4 o'clock, 4:30, whenever it might be, actually, nothing really should be happening again until you arrive in again the next morning. The last thing you want to do at 7:30 in the evening while you're sitting watching the telly or whatever it is you're doing is be receiving WhatsApp messages saying, oh, we need to do this tomorrow. Can you get in early to put that out? Can you get this resource? You know, really, that shouldn't be happening. And it's a culture we have to move away from, because teachers of 30 years ago didn't have any of that, because there wasn't even an email system in those days, let alone WhatsApp. And I think it's a dangerous road that we've gone down, whereby we have to have instant communication culture. And in some schools, I know it's really rife, where these WhatsApp groups and all this sort of thing me personally, I don't agree with it. I think when you walk out that door at the end of the day, you wait till the next morning to sort out the next round of whatever needs to be done. And I think it's a worrying culture in schools where this is encouraged. Set up a departmental WhatsApp group so you can all, message each other at 6:30 in the evening. It could be, even if it's, if you want to speak to someone, you do it on a one-to-one level, but shouldn't be about work. It should be about, whatever, but it shouldn't be about work. And I think that's another worrying development of culture that has become more apparent in the last few years.
I would agree with that. Liam, I'm just going to go through some types of office politicians that we have in our organisations. Number one, you've got the gossip hound who knows everything. They share secrets. They don't keep anything confidential, not even on social media. The only way to deal with them is to keep conversations to business only and exit conversations if possible. Number two, you've got the credit thief. They take credit for other people's ideas. You need to speak up about your ideas and give your boss frequent updates so they don't get confused about where the ideas have come from. Number three, the flatterer. They compliment everyone, everywhere. People can see through them. Just keep an eye on them. You've got the saboteur, who has a personal or a selfish agenda, who don't mind throwing co-workers under the bus, and they don't take responsibility for their own mistakes. The only way to deal with them is to confront them and to keep records of what's going on. You've also got the lobbyist, who fights hard to sway people's opinions. So you must make sure you speak up when you disagree. You have an advisor who actually advises the head teacher and other senior leaders, and they're influencing behind the scenes without you knowing. And then we've got positive office politics, which is where you have people collaborating with others for the greater good. And the only way you can do that is to ditch the cliques, work across the organization, look for win-wins, appeal to motivations, and play with the players who are genuinely there to work. Now, when somebody's completely positive all the time, people can spot insincerity, and they can also spot the people who are truly invested and care about the students and the staff, and they work in a different way. So you need to be very, very careful when you're in the workplace. Another thing that we're going to move on to is female rivalry. Liam, I'm pretty sure men don't have to go through this, but women have to go through female rivalry all the time.
You say that, but I've seen rivalry amongst men as well. I think I know men and have worked with men that are very competitive and want to, be the best, be better than you, and will score points as a result of it. I've seen people that I've worked with that, will, try and go out of their way to catch the head's attention and try and earn a few more points there. I'm not sure if it's something that's just confined to women. I think it's also something that's definitely amongst men as well. I think don't be under any illusions that there are not men out there that want to score points and try and get themselves higher up the ladder, climb the ladder because they want to, progress their careers, and will go out and they'll do anything they have to do to do that.
That's reassuring, because female rivalry usually happens when a woman uses her power to keep another woman down, mistreats her, or competes with her unfairly. And the only way you can deal with this is to keep your distance, because most of the time you can't trust this person and you can't confide in them. And I think, Liam, where the difference is that one of the biggest drivers for female rivalry is that there's only one seat at the table, because patriarchy uses this scarcity mindset to their advantage.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I wouldn't say. I would say that, like I said, I would say that does exist with men as well. I mean, some men particularly, like I said, I've seen men who will do anything to climb to the top. And if they have to use bullying tactics to do it, or point scoring tactics to do it, they'll do it. That isn't to say, yes, of course, I've seen women who are very competitive also. And like I said, I've worked with a couple of people whom their ego became so big, that they thought almost that they were God. And they wanted the adulation of people. They used to use a bit of a saying, this thing, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Well, I think we've probably all met a few of those people in our years around.
Yeah, and I think the difference with female rivalry is that there's this internalized sexism and bias, unconscious bias that everybody has because they judge each other. So, for example, if you're a woman, do you judge other women for choices you wouldn't personally make? Do you criticize women for minor transgressions, but forgive men for major ones? Do you make excuses for men, and do you compete or collaborate? It's essentially, you need to learn how to break the cycle. And I think with women can only help women through mentorship, advocacy, and helping them to create opportunities for other women, making sure you're building relationships, amplifying women, crediting them, joining forces, don't gossip, and obviously sponsor them and advocate for them. Because I feel, Liam, that men are able to get along slightly better than women can.
Well, I think you mentioned earlier, you said, and I think it's something that you and I spoke about when you came on my radio program. Sadly, sexism in the workplace does still exist. And I do think, having interviewed a number of women in education on my program, and I know you will have done on your program as well, I do think attitudes are changing. And I do think, this male-dominated world that sadly has existed for a number of years, there is now starting to be a little bit more of a level playing field, which is fantastic. But obviously there is still a long way to go. But I do think this generation of women in education now, young teachers and sort of teachers in their middle career who are maybe considering headship and things like that, I do think they are in a far better position now to create that level playing field and challenge some of the things that have gone on historically. I do think, through things such as, I know a very good head called Christella Jamil, who's a head teacher of a school in Tottenham, and she's a very passionate. She's created this women's education network that they do a lot of mentoring and a lot of coaching and a lot of work on some of these issues that we've been discussing. And if those organisations exist and they can really, put the message across, hopefully in the next 10 to 20 years, attitudes and mentality with women and with men will change even further. That's all we can hope for.
Exactly. And yes, Women Ed are doing a lot of work on this as well. We're going to move on to our final bit today, which is the boss that you're talking about, Liam, the boss who thinks he's God. Gaslighting bosses. These are manipulative bosses who go out of their way to make sure you don't develop the skills you need, takes credit for your ideas, and hides information. Now, the thing with gaslighting is that it's covert and it's not overt. They're undermining you negatively and impacting you. And it's sneaky and it's hard to prove. And they don't break company policy, so no one else can see through them. What advice can we give there?
It's a very, very difficult one. I used a sort of personal example earlier, and for me, I, if you like, walked away and went on to another school and then eventually came back. And, you just have to sort of move on from it. Some heads have got big egos. That's part of being in the job, I guess. I've met some fantastic heads who, I can see really deeply care about their staff and their students. Some that pretend they do. Some who've got massive egos. This one head in particular that I mentioned earlier, I believed in hugely, yet I think they did believe they were God, and I do believe their ego was massive and still is. It is a difficult one, Sobia. It is because generally those people are in positions of power. So you've kind of either got two choices. You either move on or you just got to go along with it. And I guess I'm the sort of person who does challenge, you know, and I believe in accountability. And I do believe that no one is more powerful and no one is bigger than the actual school itself. So it's a hard one. Generally, most people, they will move on because they can't work with that culture. All you can hope is eventually is that other people see through that person as well. And I do think, you know, I think about my own example, some people did. You know, and there will be loads of people listening to this who will have seen leaders like that, whom, you know, who their ego is massive and they think they rule the world. And, you know, unless the whole body sees it, it can be very difficult. You then become a bit of a lone voice in the shadows almost. So most of those people tend to move on. It's probably the only solution.
The other things that you can do, thanks for that, Liam, is number one, make sure it's gaslighting. Do they deny things even in writing? Do they blame others? Do they sow confusion? And do they tell you that you're incompetent? And usually, as my listeners have been messaging in, it's because of jealousy, incompetence, insecurity, and narcissism. The best way to deal with this type of person is to document everything, protect your mental health, reach out to your support network, minimize your direct contact with that person, and confront and escalate with caution. And like Liam said, explore opportunities elsewhere. The best way to deal with all these types of office politics is not to engage, but not to ignore either, because it does happen. So you just need to learn how to use office politics positively. Liam, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much.
No, it's been lovely coming on, Sobia. It's been really nice. A good way to spend a Sunday morning.
Great. Thank you so much. Right, guys, I'm out of self-isolation. Luckily, my family are getting better as well. There's only a couple of more days left for those of us who are still teaching. I've got 2 days left, Monday and Tuesday. If you're celebrating Eid this week, Eid Mubarak to everybody who is. Graham and Khalil to follow on today. Thank you so much for listening. We hope it was beneficial. See you for a final show next week. Then I'm off on holidays as well. Take care.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.